Funding for the following program has been provided by this station and other public television stations, and by a grant from the Chubb Group of Insurance Companies.
Thank you. You may have always thought, as I did, that Methodists frowned on dancing, but that didn't seem to apply to my guest tonight and tomorrow. He was born into a Methodist family, and it's a good thing he was born at all. Otherwise, we'd all have been deprived of some wonderful dancing, like the dancing in the hit show Broadway called Dancin', or in the highly successful and controversial movie All That Jazz, or in Pippin or Cabaret, or Pajama Game, or Damn Yankees, or any number of other shows and movies. And my guest created all that dancing, and he is, of course, the most original and provocative choreographer, director, Bob Fosse. And if All That Jazz is half as autobiographical as they say it is, he's a pretty original and provocative personality himself. Well, we all know that he is. Will you welcome, please, then, the legendary Bob Fosse. Gosh, you move well, I must say. Bob, if I may call you that, when you made All That Jazz, you must have known that you were taking some far out or risky chances in making such an untraditional film, and that's the way it was greeted. A lot of people.
Very mixed reaction to it, yes.
But, yeah, mixed.
I didn't know in the beginning, no, Dick. I knew it was strange, but I didn't think anyone would... I made a mistake of making him a director-choreographer. If I had made him a painter or a musician or something, I don't think so much attention would have been called to the autobiographical part of it.
Yes,
had I known that I was going to take such raps in some quarters, I don't think I would have done it. No.
I'm not sure I understand why that is, because so many people said, well, who does he think he is? We'll know all about his life. Well, it's been done before, and that's what a lot of art is about, is somebody's life. And
I'm basically a showman, so I don't think I would try anything that I didn't think had some wider appeal than just my own life. I think my own life is probably a little too dull, so that's been greatly fictionalized and characters combined and incidences added, and the chronology of it's off. But it is, a lot of it's based on my life, yeah.
Was Roy Scheider, he wasn't your first choice to play you, and yet he's so fine in the film. It seems like he would have to have been.
I think he's terrific in it.
Yeah.
We went through a lot. You know, it was very difficult to get the movie on because they thought it was a risky project. And
they meaning
the big they.
Wiser heads at the studios and all that.
There's always a big they.
Yeah.
The money people. And they said if you can get a big name star. So I went through a lot of these stars who liked the project, but for one reason or another were a little timid about it. And finally, Dreyfuss said he would like to do it, Richard Dreyfuss. And at that time, he had just made The Goodbye Girl and Close Encounters, so they said, that's terrific. And he was in for a long time, and then shortly after he won the Academy Award, we started working together, and I guess he had some personal problems of some kind, and he decided to withdraw, so we were without a leading man for some time. And then Roy read the script and said, I like this, I want to do it, I understand this guy, and everybody thinks I'm this stoic-faced detective all the time, and I'm not. I can play this part. And I said, well, come up to the apartment and read it. And he did, and he was absolutely charming in it. And he looks like a dancer, too, you know, he's so physical looking.
Yeah. I think most actors would have been scared of the dancing part and thought I won't be.
He was scared of it. He was very scared of it. But he worked hard at it.
Yeah. Do you see any contradiction in the fact that you, who are known as a shy soul, would display yourself so unashamedly on the screen? And if not gaudily, some people said?
I think I alternate between being shy, and then there's a certain extrovert part of me, and all the stuff that was used in the film I thought was would be interesting to other people, and I think it's proven that way. I suppose there is a contradiction, except sometimes I want to sit in the corner and suck my thumb, and another time I want to get up and do a time step, and you know about doing time steps in public.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I do. I guess we should reveal this. There's a very complicated time step that only I can do, and try as he will, Bob has tried to master it, and it's all over town now that he can't do it.
Dick tried to teach me several times how to do that. That's a big mystery to me, that step.
It's too bad, because if I ever do a show, I won't be able to use
out.
you. What's the agony of filmmaking for you? Where are the thrills?
Other than a bad review, you mean?
Well, maybe that, yeah. But I mean, like Hitchcock has said to not like the filming so much as the planning.
It's just the reverse with me, I think. I don't like the planning. And the casting is always painful because there are so many actors and dancers looking for that dream part that you have to reject so many. And I don't particularly like doing that. I like shooting and editing a great deal.
Yeah.
Particularly editing I like.
I figured out with my ready pencil on the movie Lenny, when I couldn't believe the number of feet of film that were shot, and I calculated that it came to 60 miles of film. I think it was 360,000 feet, something like that.
Could be.
Which eventually came down to only a couple of miles of film that were used in it.
I tend to shoot a lot.
That?
Beg pardon?
How do you cope with all that? It's all hanging somewhere in strips, isn't it? And you have to go through it all.
Well, it takes a long time, it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a very good film editor with you who's willing to sit through all the mistakes that you made. You know, when you're making a film, there's a certain amount of self-delusion that has to go on, you know, and you think you did this scene very well, and you think you got the most out of the actor, and you think you shot it well, and then 3 months later you look at it again and say, oh, I really messed that up. And
what I thought was there isn't there?
No.
Yeah.
I've many times insisted that I shot a certain scene, and I didn't. I said, I remember sitting behind the camera, I remember lining up the shot, I'm sure it's there. And they would search and search and search, and I hadn't shot the scene.
That is strange.
Yeah, well, in my mind, I meant to shoot.
You've made it already in your head. You've probably had to turn down more people than most people in the business, because when you audition for a musical, of course, you just have what they often call a cattle call of people who come in and have their heart set on being able to finally afford their own apartment. And
yes, it's hope in their eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I have turned down more people than even girls have turned me down. It's pretty close. But when I look at the old lists of people that I used to keep all the audition lists, and sometimes I just for fun run through them. I've turned down some of the most talented people in the business.
You wanted to be Astaire, according to Gwen Verdon, the ex-Mrs. Fosse. That Gwen Verdon, as opposed to the many others. Was she right about that, in the sense that you actually, as so many people did, saw him on the screen and said, that's for me, at an impressionable age?
Very much so, yes.
Yeah.
When I was very young, there was a neighborhood theater that sometimes would show 4 features on a Saturday, which is, you know, about 8 hours of movies. And I used to sit through that twice sometimes. And dance my way home, jumping over garbage cans and fantasizing that one day I'd be Astaire. And then later on in my 20s, I was under contract as an actor, singer, dancer at MGM, and I got to meet him and I got to watch him rehearse. And I even danced for him once.
Did he say anything?
He says, that's nice, kid. I was so nervous, I was falling all over myself doing it, you know. But you can imagine what it's like in a big rehearsal hall, and finally there's your idol, and you're going to get a chance to dance for him. And I was quite nervous.
Yeah. I think everybody has almost everybody has wanted to be Astaire when you see him on the screen, but you came a lot closer than a lot of people did, and actually made some movie musicals and danced on the screen. And,
I did, but nothing like Astaire.
Was that what they call the sort of the end of the golden era at MGM that you came in on? Would it be about those years?
I would say it was the tail end of those big musicals, yes. They were sort of on their way out, although a couple were being made at that time, like Bandwagon and so forth. That's what I saw Astaire working on. And I forget what Gene Kelly was working on, but it was an exciting period for me because in the old days at MGM there were 3 rehearsal halls, and Gene Kelly would be in one and Fred Astaire in another, and I'd be in the middle peeking through the keyhole trying to steal something.
But you reject the idea that you have a certain style, I think, when people say the Fosse style, and yet you admit that, say, Gwen, when in fact when she was here doing a show with me, she would only have to strike one pose and someone would say that's a Fosse move or that's a Fosse manner. Or
I suppose if you repeat something enough times it's called a style, you know. I would like to think that, you know, I'm more versatile and have a wider range than just that one thing that everybody, that kind of thing that people say my dances are like. But it came out of, I started with hats because I began losing my hair very early. So I began wearing hats and began playing with them. And I've always been slightly round-shouldered, and so I started to exaggerate that. And I don't have what the ballet dancers call a turnout. So I started turning my feet in, and I guess that's the style they talk about.
Yeah, when they parody you, they immediately turn their toes in, push the pelvis a certain way. No, it's very ungainly when I do it somehow. There's damn few requests for it.
I know, and I'm beginning to feel that too.
Where were you? Let's go back to where you came from, in the old sense of the phrase, coming from.
Mom.
There was Mom, and then there was. Let's take age 9. Can you?
Yeah, that's when I started formal dance training. During the summers, I used to hang around with my sister, who was a year and a half older, and her 2 girlfriends, and I had a crush on one of the girlfriends, and they decided that summer they were going to take dancing lessons. So I said, gee, I'm not going to get left out of this, so I went along with them. And in 3 weeks, they quit, and for some reason I stayed on and have been plugging away ever since.
You worked with strippers at an early age.
Yeah, I became...
There's quite a vivid scene in the film of that.
This dancing school was run by a man and wife who had been in vaudeville. And instead of, you know, guest teachers from the New York City Ballet, we had clowns come in and vaudevillians and third-rate Shakespearean actors to teach us makeup and all of that. And they were very eager to get you into the professional world. So at 13, I started earning money. And not in the best of places, but...
Was it a bad influence on you? Could you have gone seedy and corrupt from...
At the time, it gave me a kind of an edge with my colleagues. You know, I was making $60 a week because that was the minimum, $10 a night. And I could go back and tell my friends, because I stayed in school through high school, what a terrific time I had and about all of these racy women around and how wonderful it was. In retrospect, as I grew older, I realized that I was very, very lonely, and it was really not the best of atmospheres, and I think in some ways that it did leave a scar of some kind. I was too early to be in it.
Too young to be...
I think so, too young.
What do strippers do with a young boy of that age? Are they motherly? He asked innocently. Are they friendly? Do they look out for you? Do they help you with your lessons?
Yes.
Or shall I ask you what I really want to ask?
I used to pass myself off as older because I always could do that.
Claim to be 11?
So they thought I was about 18 or 19. When they found out I was 13 or 14, then it was a rather cruel game of teasing me and making fun of me. You've seen the picture.
Yes. There is a scene that's not easy to describe, but they toy with you a bit backstage, and so that when you appear on stage, there's some visual evidence of their having done so.
That's very accurate.
That's a rather nice way of putting it, isn't it? This fly, by the way, has been on some of the best people. He's here every day, and
I'm flattered.
I don't know whether he gets scale or
He's
not.
trying to learn that time step, I think.
But you survived all that, and you probably have, I'm sure you'll admit this, as complete a set of neuroses as it's possible to have in show business. And
I'm sure there's some I've left out, but I think I have most of them, yeah.
Keep going. And it's fascinating. In the film, there's a lot of that. There's also a scene of open heart surgery. I just wondered if your shirt were all the way open, would I see a scar all the way down.
Yes, you would.
That would be
Yeah.
from the
I had open heart surgery about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Right after Lenny. Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone had ever predicted that you could make a film which was in some ways funny or what's loosely called a musical comedy, in which there are scenes of open heart surgery,
Well, that scene
on that
seems
basis
to-
alone, they'd have said,
Yeah,
"You're
that's-
crazy. We're not going to invest in this." And it certainly isn't going to win, 5 Academy Awards, or was it only 4?
4.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And the Cannes Film Festival.
And the Cannes Film Festival.
That's the scene that seems to bother people most, and the thing that I liked about the scene was the counterpoint of that scene, because you don't see that much of the operation. As a matter of fact, I think there's about 13 seconds of it. But it keeps cutting back and forth to these theatrical producers who are finding out from the insurance company that this man, Joe Gideon, the part that Roy Scheider plays, might be worth more dead to them than he is alive, and the slight temptation there is with anything when greed and money is involved. That was the point of the scene.
Yeah.
But I guess, you see movies all the time with a great deal more violence than that. Heads getting blown off, and I just look at The Godfather. But I think people know that that's movie blood, and I think because they sense this is a real person and there's an identification that one day they might have to be on that table, that's why the scene has become so controversial.
Yeah. Where, in fact, did you get that film?
That was shot, a man, the doctors gave permission and the patient gave permission. And they went into the operating room and shot.
In order to use it in this film? It isn't something that's from a medical teaching film or something?
No, they have those, but they were in 16 millimeter. I tried blowing them up and they were not sufficient, so we got permission to do it.
I hope the man survived.
Yes, he's seen the movie and he keeps saying, "That's my artery in the movie, look at that."
It's a movie with heart, all right.
That's what I wanted to call it.
Oh.
The musical with a heart.
I'm sorry, it's early. Some people, though, are really just so turned off by any surgical film or any idea of surgery that the making of the incision will cause them to faint.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's been carried out of all that jazz, but...
The times I've seen, I've heard gasps, and
yeah, there were gasps when...
a few runs up the aisle, but no one's lynched me yet, so I don't know.
Yeah. I'm still interested some more in your childhood, though, because it was one I think I might have enjoyed. It sounds like from the outside being in show business in some way, being around old vaudevillians, magicians, and whatever else was on the bill. And was it your dad and your uncle who were...
Yes.
Had an act?
Yeah. By the time I was born, though, he was a salesman, but he told me about the act. It was he and his brother, Richard Fosse, who died at a very young age of cancer, and he was very romantic about it. That's one of the reasons I think that he wanted me to be in show business. But the act that they had was probably one of the worst acts I've ever heard in my life, as he described it, but he described it with great pride. There were 4 of them, and they sang, first of all, they sang Barbershop Quartet, but the big finish of the act was my uncle, who was very musical, one of those never had a lesson but could play anything, and he tap danced and he wrote songs, and they'd put a bed sheet over the piano keyboard, blindfold him, and he'd put on canvas gloves and play requests, and that was the big finish to the act, which is probably the worst act I've ever heard of.
Did he hit any of the right notes? Or?
I don't know, I wasn't there, I doubt it.
I never saw anything like that on the Ed Sullivan Show. Is there a trick to that, or I wonder how he did?
My father saw sheer talent, and probably should have been one of the major acts of all time, the way it was very romantically described to me.
Yeah. When Rubinstein hears of this, he'll be appearing with a sheet from now on.
Try it sometime.
For a fellow who seems so pleasant, I can't picture you being abusive when you work. But every director has tantrums, and we're told. And there was also when you made the movie Lenny, you were supposed to have used what some people find a kind of cruel way of getting an effect from an actress or an actor. Is any of that true? Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm cruel. I don't think I'm abusive. I have been on occasion where my back was against the wall. I'm not temperamental. I think I'm a very patient director. That's one of the reasons I seem to run over schedule all the time. But because of film, it's not like stage, you know. You have to get that effect just once, that look on somebody's face of shock or panic or pain. And I will play tricks on people.
Like what?
Well, let's see. In Cabaret, Marissa Berenson had a scene that was, she played a young Jewish girl in Germany. And she came out of her door, and she was, some Nazi toughs were supposed to have killed her pet fox terrier, and it just had to register on her face as she looked at the doorstep, and they left it on her doorstep. And she was doing very, very well with it. But then I went and got a tray of entrails from a butcher and set them on this tray and told her, no matter what happens, keep going. And there was a little part of an actress still working there, so she probably knew something was going on. But I got the effect, and I'm not opposed to shooting off a gun if somebody wants a shock or a jump, because after you do something a set number of times, you get so mechanical with it. And it's an attempt to do that. I've done sometimes what people consider worse things than that.
You put the tray of guts where she would be surprised by them.
Yeah, because we were only shooting from here, so you couldn't see that. So she just had to open the door and look down and register something on her face that was comparable to the pain that she'd have to feel and the shock.
What if she'd vomited?
Well, then they'd be talking about that the same way they're talking about the operation and all that.
Couldn't have resisted using
I would have left
that
in. That's
right. That might be no, it wouldn't be a first. I had seen that. I don't know whether it was real or not. Well, back then in Chicago, was your what am I trying to say? What was your maximum dream of how far you thought you would get? What did you see as success?
I wanted to be a nightclub performer, but in more supper clubs. In those days, the hotels all had rooms that carried entertainment in it, and when I was young, these people who owned the dancing school would take me to see somebody like Paul Draper, or in those days another man by the name of Georgie Taps, and I had never seen anybody tap dance to Bach, and it was just eye-opening, and they'd stand up there for a whole hour, and I was just amazed that somebody could do that, and that's what I wanted to do very much. And all my effort was put towards nightclubs. I never dreamt I'd be good enough to be like Fred Astaire in a movie or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to be, but I thought, I'll never make that. I mean, that's out of my reach.
What else have you done to actors that people thought was crueler than the guts?
Oh, no. I'm a little ashamed of this one. But I did get the reaction. It was Valerie Perrine, and I was in Lenny, and the scene was a courtroom, and she was being sentenced to a year in prison, which was supposed to be a big shock to her, and I couldn't quite get the look on her face. It was very close on her, as the man saying, you're going to prison for a year, because the attorney had been saying, I'll get you off, and there's no problem. It was for dope of some kind. And I just let the fellas keep rolling the camera, and I kept talking to the fellas around the camera, and I happened to know a gentleman that she was very attached to at that time, and I am ashamed of this. It was rotten. Why did you bring this up? I feel like the heel.
I feel awful, because for a moment I was afraid you were going to say that you said that he had died or something.
That's what I did say. I was talking to fellas around the camera crew, and he's involved in movies, and I said, did you hear about the terrible helicopter accident where the fellow fell out of the helicopter? And she just blanched. She went totally white. She just stood like that, and that's exactly what I wanted. Oh, do I feel terrible now? You're adding to all my guilt.
Get off my stage. I'll never feel the same about you again. Oh, and there's even music coming in at this point. That's nice.
Maybe that'll save me.
That'll save you. I really didn't want to add to your burden of guilt.
I do nice things once in a while.
I know. He's done a lot of nice things, folks. He sends Valentines to old people. And, Bob, I will see you tomorrow night, and we'll continue to make you feel just awful. Bob Fosse. See you then. Good night.
Funding for the Dick Cavett Show has been provided by this station and other public television stations, and by a grant from the Chubb Group of insurance companies.
You're watching Metro Arts 13.
Welcome back to Metro Arts 13. I'm Rita Moreno at Sardi's. The relationship between the choreographer and the dancer is something very special, I'm here to tell you. And our next program is something very special. It's a rare gem, one that you theater lovers can only see on Metro Arts 13. In a continuation of Dick Cavett's interviews with Bob Fosse, Fosse talks about the women in his life. I cannot wait. I know you're going to enjoy it.
Funding for the following program has been provided by this station and other public television stations, and by a grant from the Chubb Group of insurance companies.
Good evening and welcome to the second of two shows with a man who once set out to become another Fred Astaire. And as you can see from this early photo, it was a worthy ambition, but he didn't make it. And instead, he had to settle for becoming Bob Fosse. And now there are youngsters all over the country setting out to be Bob Fosse. That is a very worthy ambition, too, since Mr. Fosse is one of our finest choreographers and directors, and the man who brought us shows like Dancin' and movies like All That Jazz, among many others, and Cabaret and Liza with a Z, and you name it. Will you welcome again, please, Bob Fosse. Last night we learned what a dreadful man you are, and you admitted to a certain technique of directing in which you surprise the actor with something that seems to be from real life. But that sort of thing would, of course, work on the stage. That's something unique about film. That
I think it's you couldn't possibly do it on the stage, Dick, because then it's a whole other kind of technique, because you can't repeat that. It's a one time. I mean, you cannot put those entrails out the second time. I mean, this is no way you can do it.
There have been some of the most interesting women in your life, and I don't know how much you'd like to talk about them, but I'll take a chance. I never met Joan McCracken, who was supposed to have somehow known you in such a way that she, I think you said in an article I read, told you to get up and get out and do this and that, and very much responsible for
yeah, she was. She was very important in my life. She was about 12 years older than I was. She never quite told me. Mm-hmm. But as I said before, my ambition was just to be a nightclub performer, and she said, Bobby, you got more than that, and the problem is you don't have enough schooling, enough formal education in the theater. So I just took a year off, got myself a bicycle, and went from class to class. You know, I'd study playwriting, I'd study voice and diction, and 3 or 4 dance classes and singing lessons and acting classes. And I had been in the Navy, so I had a year of this schooling coming on a GI Bill. And it was probably the most productive year that I've ever had, because I got a chance to study with the very best of teachers. Yeah. And it's paid off a great deal for me.
Yeah. Gwen Verdon said something that I found very touching in an article about you. She said that he's enhanced our lives in so many ways, those of us who are intimate with you. You meant women who in your life, and the tragedy is that we've never really been able to do anything to enhance his.
That's it.
It's a nice
line, but I'm not sure. I mean, Gwen gave me a lot. I mean, we have a wonderful child together. We had many theatrical successes and a lot of fun. I think working with her is probably one of the most exciting experiences I've ever had in the theater. It was only when the work stopped that the trouble began.
What is it that some dancers like Gwen Verdon, and there aren't any dancers like Gwen Verdon, you know what I mean, can thrill you, and others seem to be doing exactly the same things, but there's no, your scalp doesn't tingle when they do it.
I know, and there are probably a lot more technically advanced people than Gwen. But Gwen has, you know, in singing you call it soul. I guess it's the same thing in dancing, heart, soul, feeling, a desire to be the best of whatever you're doing, and a desire to give the audience a show. And she always would try to give an audience the best. Plus she has this vulnerability that comes through even if she's knocking down brick walls. You suddenly want to take care of Gwen for some reason or another.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Even when she's bowling. I saw her bowling one
Yeah.
time. She's very good. There's a heartbreak quality there.
Yeah,
always.
no matter what she's doing. And she's a very strong woman, you know. I mean, she's not weak, or she's very independent, self-sufficient. But you want to take care of her.
Bob, how did you manage to overcome the fact that the one film you did was the first time you did a musical film, directed it, was certainly not a success, and you usually don't get a second chance on something like that. Now, were you really down and out at that point, or were you just not welcome in Hollywood?
Since I started in the theater, I've never really been down and out in the theater, but it was you're talking about Sweet Charity.
Yeah.
And it was a show I had done on Broadway for Gwen, and it was quite a successful Broadway show. And then they asked me to make the movie of it with Shirley MacLaine, and I said yes. I didn't think I was quite ready to direct, but I felt I'd never get another chance, so I jumped in and directed it, and it was not a success. Although in the beginning it looked like the best picture ever made, but it suddenly went sour. I just had to do that, and after I made it, I said, I really love directing films, and I'm going to wait until I get another film, because I would like to prove that I know how to direct a musical film. And Hollywood is a very fickle place. If you have a failure, the phone doesn't ring too much, as you've heard. If you've got a hit, I mean, the offers just keep pouring in and pouring in and pouring in. And before they saw the movie, when the word was just around California, I had hundreds of offers to make movies. Hundreds. 4 to make movies. And I said, no, I'm waiting for the right thing. But after it opened, I mean, it was pretty cold. I mean, no one really wanted me for a long time. And then Cabaret came along, and they offered it to like 5, 6, 7, 8 other directors who turned it down for one reason or another. I know Billy Wilder turned it down. I know Gene Kelly turned it down. And when they said, you know, would you like to do it? I said, oh, yeah, absolutely.
I just wonder what had happened in those 5 years. That was before you had...
It wasn't really quite 5 years.
You had won the Triple Crown. I guess you're the only person I could meet who's won the Emmy, the Oscar, and the Tony all in the same year.
Yeah. I lost Miss America that year, though. I didn't
But I bet you gave it a try.
I tried, yes. It was a swimming suit that gave me a problem.
but frivolously, folks. The memory of Sweet Charity had faded enough by then, or you had done enough in the theater that they were willing to let you have Cabaret?
I didn't do anything in between.
Nothing?
Nothing. No, I could always get a show if I wanted, but I was determined that the next thing I would do would be a movie musical. Because I still think Sweet Charity is a pretty good film. It's flawed, as everything I do seems flawed, but there's enough in there, and for a first directorial thing, I think if you look at it again in retrospect, you see it's very good stuff in there. And I felt that way, and I felt I took a bum rap from some of the magazines, and I wanted to prove that given the right material, I thought it was the material that I was taking the blame for, that I could make a successful movie musical.
Yeah.
So I didn't do anything. I worked on another movie. It was not a musical, but I worked on another one, but I didn't really work for like 1.5 years, I guess.
That's got to be tough for somebody like you who has said that you're real... What's the line? It comes from Walenda, the wire walker, and I think isn't it in the film, all that jazz?
Yeah.
That,
to be on the wire is life, the rest is waiting.
That's right.
But you know, that's after the big Walenda fall, and they asked him whether he was going up again, and that's what he supposedly said.
Yeah. you ever wish you could just keep your personal life and your theater life totally separate? In the film, you were involved with that lady, and have you ever thought maybe the people who just have a hard and fast rule that they never mix business and pleasure are better off?
I envy that. Yeah, I do envy that, but it doesn't seem to work for me. And at a certain age, you don't give up trying to correct the flaws in your character, but you make some little decision to try to live with them and make the best you can out of them. I do try not to become involved with people I work with, but it's very difficult. You're thrown into a stressful situation. They are very attractive women, and they have a sort of need for the director and choreographer, so there's all sorts of things going on.
It has to be complicated.
It is, yes.
Now, Bob.
But you know, I worked with Gwen after we were split up.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was a very successful relationship. I mean, we did Chicago, which I liked very much, and
yes.
That was well after we were separated, many years after.
Yeah. So you don't, it isn't necessarily the end
No,
professionally.
it's not,
In
no.
fact, sometimes it's the beginning in
Yes.
some ways. That sounds a little hokey, doesn't it? I can't help noticing that you're smoking. Now,
No, the property man came and put this in my hand. I didn't do this.
or you caught someone smoking
Yes,
and took that away
right.
from them.
Is it bothering you? I'm sorry.
No, yes, only in the sense that you've had 2 heart attacks, and I want to know why the hell you're smoking.
Yeah, well, my doctor asked me the same thing. I don't really know why. Nerves, I guess, and gives me something to do with my hands, and oral anxiety. I've heard all of the things, but
But you can get worry beads for that, or any number.
they don't taste as good.
No.
I should give it. I've cut down. I've really tried to cut down a lot. I mean, I think I'm down to 5 packs a day now.
It's the despair of your friends, as you know, and I think it was Daniel Melnick or someone, it was a piece I read, said that in the hospital Bob has had time to think and has realized he has to give up all these vices and things that could be shortening his life, and here you are, overworking probably and puffing away.
My dearest friend is...
I know you didn't come here to be lectured by someone
but
who's
I'm getting
probably
one anyway.
20 years younger than you are.
I was rehearsing Chicago.
Sorry.
That's all right. Is that true?
I hope not.
No.
Otherwise
I was rehearsing Chicago, and you know, the director has a certain position that you try not to make him undercut his position or undermine him in front of the cast. Certainly, you can say terrible things to a director, but in front of his actors, he's supposed to be omnipotent and understand everything and all-knowing. I was rehearsing Chicago with all the actors on stage, and I was smoking a cigarette shortly after the operation, about 4 months after, and my best friend, Patty Chayefsky, came into the theater, and he walked right down, right in front of the entire cast and slapped the cigarette out of my mouth, and it made me look pretty bad, and then I realized it was an act of love, you know.
Yeah. Like the scene in Boys Town, you know, where Spencer Tracy knocks it out of Mickey Rooney's mouth?
I think that's where he saw it.
Probably did. Yeah. Well, in everything I've read about you on this subject, and they never can resist treating your, covering your demons that haunt you and so on all through the years, and talking about this sort of thing. I've never seen any reference to psychotherapy or psychiatry, and it makes me wonder if maybe you're afraid it would take away your motivation to keep working.
You're suggesting something to me?
No, I just wondered if that was...
No, I was in analysis 5 years.
Oh, well then I...
Yeah, I went to Dr. Sager, was a very well-known doctor here, and I sometimes went double sessions, which is, you know, 250 minutes, whatever that is. Dancers only count to 8. It's a big problem. And I was in group therapy for a while, and it did help me a great deal. It helped me with work. I don't think I ever got to the, you know, the real problems, and now I just can no longer go back and hash over my mother and father and blame them for anything that I've gone through. And actually, when I sit down and am quiet about it, I've had a pretty terrific life. You know, neuroses and marital problems and all. I'm fine.
I thought, also amateur analysis, maybe you're one of those people who needs to be on the brink, that needs a sense of danger, of tempting the fates. You certainly do in your work. You
Yes.
take chances. You don't do a musical that's like the one you did before because it succeeded.
I always like that sense that it could very easily fail. It's a kind of, gives me an impotence that I need to work harder, and I always like fighting the odds. You know, I get offered shows that I just know are going to be hits. You know, it's a great score, and it's the kind of story that always works, and the boy gets the girl and loses the girl, or the boy gets the boy and loses the girl. I don't know. It's and I just know that they're going to make it, and I say, no, I can't do it. Yeah. I want something a little more offbeat, because, you know, you run out of time for projects, and I don't have time for that anymore.
Yeah. But it does worry me. I think I love you enough to knock a cigarette out of your mouth, but I can at least point out to you that there are those that have filters on them that can be obtained for almost the same money.
Yes, well, I tear them off.
Oh, Robert. Of course, you'll further infuriate people by outliving all the people who
Probably. I'll be punished and live to 146. Yes. And then I'll learn that time step sooner or later.
Yeah. What's the worst off you ever were? Did you really think you were Jesus at one point?
Oh my! Who told you? Yes.
You talked about that in Film Comment or the other magazine there.
Coming back at me, it sounds terrible.
Interview.
Yes, well, I was on some drugs.
I realize that isn't funny, you know, but it's interesting. It's not unusual.
Yeah.
And it's
not unusual, is it?
No.
I was on. I got hooked on Seconal for a while, which is a very dangerous and easy to get hooked on ups and downs. And I was taking Seconal and Dexedrine at the same time, and I was hallucinating. And there was once when Gwen had to pick me off the wall because I thought I could fly, that sort of thing. Yeah. I don't recommend it at all. I mean, I don't think it helped my work. I don't think it helped anything. But I did go through that, yes.
Do you ever dream your work? I think it was also Gwen who speculated that you may get some of those visions of those phantasmagorical numbers and things that you're able to come up with in
You know, I hear about people dreaming whole movies and whole things. I never been able to have that. My dreams seem all dreams. I never get an R-rated dream. Or certainly.
You never have one you could invite children to?
No. So I've never really been able to use them. I did have a dream in the hospital where they, you know, they give you morphine when you're having, they gave me morphine, which made me hallucinate. And when I was having the second heart attack in the hospital, I did dream that my daughter came in, and at that time there was a hit song called Listen to My Heartbeat, and she danced around the hospital bed, and there were nuns doing rather wild things in the hospital room, but I didn't think that was usable for all that jazz, so I made up another dream.
Yeah. But you're not one of those people who wakes up and writes, I've got it, and writes it down. And
no, I've heard of that. No, I always wake up and say, I haven't got it. Where am I going to get it?
Is it possible to describe, total mystery to me, how anybody choreographs? Do you start with making X's and O's and arrows on paper? Do you stand in front of a mirror yourself? And
yeah, I don't know how other people do it, although I've watched other choreographers. And I had a chance to watch Robbins work because I was his sort of protege to get in the business.
Jerome Robbins.
Jerome Robbins, yes.
Yeah.
I just go into a studio and I turn on any sort of music and I put on my dance clothes and I start playing around, and I'll find a little step I like and that will build a little bit, and then I don't know labonotation, which is the way of notating dance, so I make little stick figures and little notes to myself, and I have tons of notebooks on stuff. Some are indecipherable at this time, but then I call in a dancer or two and I try it out on them, and it begins to expand, and then finally I'm in rehearsals.
Yeah. Could somebody 20 years from now take those notebooks say in Australia and reproduce, or are they cryptic to anybody but you?
I think they would only make sense to me.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. I've tried to notate your famous time step, and it's almost impossible.
Someday when there's time, I'll find out why you can't learn this. Does your daughter want to be a Fosse dancer?
No, she wants to be a dancer, though.
Yeah.
And she's doing very, very well. She's at School of American Ballet this summer, and she's taking 3 and 4 classes a week. She wants to be in the ballet. She thinks musical comedy dancing is kind of trashy. She says yours is all right. I mean, you're okay, but most of it's just, you know, a lot of arm waving and not much real dancing. So she's determined to be in the ballet, and I think she's going to make it. She's got that drive that her mother has to be the best.
Yeah. Gwen Verdon being her mother.
Yes.
Did we mention that last night? There's something about the Fosse women. When you go to a Fosse musical, you can count on seeing some of the most extraordinary women that have ever walked the face of the earth.
But also the men are good looking too. Nobody ever mentions I pick these good looking men all the time.
That's right.
Yes, the
That's
women
right.
notice that.
Unlike, they don't seem to be, whatever you'd say, the average dancer in any way. They don't have to be as remarkable as Anne Reinking, but they're still wonderful women. What is it? Do you have a set of characteristics you look for? You just know it when you see it?
I've just been lucky, I guess. You know, I haven't really said I'm going to pick the prettiest girls on Broadway or anything, because they're all, if you look, very, you know, very well-trained dancers, and they sing and they act, and they're talented people. I've just been lucky that they show up, you know, and want to work with me. So, and also I think it's kind of nice for an audience to sit and look at, you know, attractive people in certain kinds of musicals. I mean, I wouldn't say that's a hard and fast rule, but I know I like to look at attractive people on stage.
Are there things you'd advise people not to do at an audition, or are there transparent ways they try to have a special appeal? Well, I guess one thing you don't do is say, may I just say how much pleasure you've given me over the years with you. I'm sure you've heard that one, but are there ways people try to stand out that are...
Well, flattery is one way, and you should dispense with flattery. You know, running down the director's credits and the composer's credits takes up an awful lot of time. The thing that I find, and I don't know if I can really articulate this, that I think gets in the way of people who are auditioning, is that they're so sure they're going to get turned down that they develop a sort of defense mechanism that keeps them from being open and gets them a little uptight. And I try to break that down and try to get them to relax, and I understand that if you're afraid somebody's going to say no to you, then you get sort of, well, the hell with you attitude, and it comes across. And I've tried various ways to get them to relax. I really try very hard at auditions, because I remember auditioning myself and how panicked I was and how my hands would sweat and how I'd throw up, and I know being up there is not easy. But it is something that seems to be a general characteristic of people who come into audition.
Yeah. Why are there so many injuries? In dancing, I'm always hearing that so-and-so's out, or Wayne Salento has shin splints, or whatever. And is it that there's the same kind of injury that can happen to anybody, or is it freak accidents, or do you just never know?
Well, once in a while it's a freak accident, but that particular show is probably the most difficult, physically difficult show ever designed. I mean, it's like playing 8 professional football games a week. I mean, they really put their bodies through some punishment.
You're aware of that when you see it, and it adds to the excitement. It's like seeing a wire walking act.
A little bit. I don't know how they do it, and every night there's 3 or 4 people that are out. But we have very good alternates that go on for them, and I don't think this show suffers very much from it. But they work very, very hard. And some of the stuff is very physical, although they're supposed to make it look like it's not. Sometimes you've got to come backstage and see what happens to them when they come off. I mean, you know, they're out there smiling and entertaining and making it look effortless. They get into the wings and they fall down, you know, and lie there as though they need oxygen. Then they're up again and into a new costume. It's amazing to watch it.
Yes, I'd love to do that. I may hold you to that. I was backstage at the ballet once, and these airy figures, graceful beauty, came off stage and,
yes, I know.
And immediately began to smoke, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I mentioned that to Nureyev when he was sitting where you are, and he said it must have been the company across the street. But it's astonishing. You realize
it is. They work so hard.
Pro football has got to be a breeze compared to being in a dance musical.
Well, we have a dance, and we have our own masseur and everything now. It sort of helps them get on stage, but there are problems always. I don't think I'm not sure I would ever attempt a show that difficult again. In a ballet, you know, they only do the role once a week or twice a week, but these dancers are doing it 8 times a week. So
do you ever limit what you'll ask them to do to something you would do yourself?
No. No. They're too good for that. I'll try it all myself to let them know that, you know, I'm in the spirit of it, and I won't ask them to do anything I think is terribly dangerous. But they're also much better equipped than I am that I will ask him to do is stuff that is physically difficult.
This is really reaching back. We only have about a minute left, but when you did Cabaret, you did some of it in Germany. Was there
Most of it.
tension at the Nazi uniforms?
Yes. I had a dance that I wanted these 6 girls to do a Nazi salute at the end of it. And I couldn't figure out where everybody knows that the right hand goes here, but does this go in the pocket or down at the side or where? And I kept asking, and no one knew. No one knew where it was. And finally I got to a number where the little boy is singing, the 14-year-old boy is singing this song, this nationalistic song. And I said, I don't know what to do. Put your hand down at the side. And 6 stage hands said, no, that's wrong. So suddenly it came out exactly where the hand went.
Yeah. I found that within half a mile of the Dachau concentration camp, I couldn't find anyone who could tell me how to get to it precisely.
It's very mysterious.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bob, this has been very interesting too.
I'd like it
I mean,
too.
really, it's. I hope I didn't embarrass you.
Just enough.
Remember, I can do that time step.
I know you can.
Thank you, Bob Fosse. It's been a real
Thank you.
pleasure. We'll see you next time. Good night.